I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which I record this podcast. I am on Yuggabal country, and I pay my respects to their elders past and present. I also extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples listening today. Here on the Smart Community Podcast, we talk about data, technology, communities, and the future. But First Nations peoples have been sharing knowledge, caring for country, and telling stories for tens of thousands of years. I honour that deep connection of storytelling and community connection as we continue our conversation together here today. Welcome, Smart Community friends. You are listening to a very special series here on the Smart Community Podcast, all about data storytelling. I'm Zoe Ether, and as part of my PhD research, I've been speaking with experts from all over the world who are using data visualizations and storytelling in real-world projects to support decision-making and advocacy. This work is deeply aligned with the Smart Community ethos, bringing people on the journey as we use data to communicate ideas, share insights, and ultimately make better, more informed decisions together. Are you ready? Let's dive in. We are kicking off this series with a friend of the pod and repeat guest, Jonathan Reichental. He's been on the show 3 times before in episodes 77, 251, and 275. I'll pop the links in the show notes for these episodes so you can go back and have a listen if you would like. Jonathan is a technologist, educator, author, and entrepreneur whose career spans media, city government, business, and education. So he brings a wealth of insight and experience to this conversation. Jonathan and I discuss the role of data visualization in technology and business, the key concepts of effective data storytelling, and the importance of understanding and considering your audience. We explore some of the challenges and issues with data visualization, such as lack of training and tools, incorrect or outdated data, information overload, and data misuse. Jonathan tells us the elements that make data visualizations impactful and shares some examples to check out as well. We finish our chat discussing Jonathan's advice and recommendations for effective data storytelling. As always, we hope you enjoy listening to this episode as much as we enjoyed making it.
Welcome to the Smart Community, Smart Regions, Smart Towns, and Smart Cities. It's where we live, work, and play. With smart communities, the future starts today. Big data, smart mobility, emerging trends galore. The Smart Community Podcast is what you're looking for.
Hello, Jonathan. How are you today?
Doing good. Coming to you from beautiful, sunny San Francisco.
Amazing. I am in Brisbane. It is also beautiful and sunny. A little chilly, but we don't have real winter here, so no complaints. Let's just jump straight in. Can you introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about your background and some of your current work or projects?
Yeah, sure. Well, while I have a diverse background, what connects it all is technology, number one. I'm a technologist, and education. These are the two sort of intersections of my life. So your listeners will note, and those that don't know me, that I have an accent. I was born in Ireland, actually, but I've been in the U.S. now for 30 years. I did become an American citizen. I have dual citizenship, and came over as already a trained technologist, and I worked for a big consulting firm, a big private consulting firm, advising internally. Actually, the business was so big that I had enough clients internally, but the partners of the firm would also take me out to clients to advise on technologies, new technologies, IT strategy. I then went to work for a media company, for O'Reilly Media here north of San Francisco. People might know the famous book that got them started, Unix in a Nutshell. If you're a technologist, you know that book is probably on your shelf, or one of the O'Reilly Animal books is on your shelf. And but the most interesting thing that happened to me, I guess, the little bit of a detour that really set my life in a very positive direction was getting hired to work for Citi as the head of technology, the CIO and CTO for the city of Palo Alto, sometimes known as the birthplace of Silicon Valley. I thought it'd be an interesting place to see how you could bring technology to bear on all the issues and challenges of running a community, a city in the 21st century. And we had some really interesting outcomes to that. We might touch on a couple today in our conversation. But after I did that, I actually decided that I would give entrepreneurship a go. And I've been doing that ever since, the last sort of 7 or 8 years, running a small IT strategy firm here in the Valley. And my clients, a lot of my clients are governments, but I also have a variety of private sector clients too. And finally, as I said, I love to teach. And if I think about all the things I just shared with you, I was always teaching somebody or learning something through all of that. I became a professor at the University of San Francisco, where I continue to teach to this day, sort of business and tech topics, and a small private school that's been really cool called Menlo College. And I also capture a lot of my ideas and education in books. I've written 8 books. And LinkedIn Learning. You can find 50 courses that I've written in multiple languages on LinkedIn Learning.
50. Wow.
Yeah, my 51st will come out later in 2025.
Exciting.
Yeah. So that's me. That's me in a nutshell.
Oh, that's not much stuff, Jonathan. That's not much stuff at all. Yes, I often, whenever I'm choosing a new path or thing to do, I think about my good friend Jonathan Reichental and the Reichental profile or the Reichental way of work, and it does inspire me a lot.
Well,
actually.
Well, that's very nice. I would be incredibly. I'm honored that I could even have the slightest impact on you. So thank you.
Definitely, more than the slightest. We have met up many times around the world, but that's not what this podcast is about today. We'll have to catch up sometime very soon, Jonathan. Let's go into, because you have done and continue to do many different things. So it's up to you how you want to answer this next question.
Sure.
But how do you use data visualizations and storytelling?
Yeah. Let me think about answering that question in several ways, all in English. One of them is that as a technologist, data has played a very big role in my life, right? Let's be clear about that. And, a few years ago, my publisher came to me and said, could you write a book about data and specifically data governance? I said, well, I've been doing tech for 30 years. I've had almost every role in technology, from pulling cables through ceilings to programming and database management and leadership. I think I know a thing or two about data. So I ended up writing a book about data and data governance. And I brought all my lessons and experiences to that book. And so one of the things which is part of that story and journey is the role of data in as a communications language, right? The ability to bring forward content that hopefully persuades an audience, And I've seen every type. I mean, as we all have, I've seen the very best and the very worst. I mean, we've been communicating data, visualizing it, telling stories with it forever. I mean, if you just have a pie chart on a slide, already that's a visualization that tells you something, right? It's not exactly a story yet, because you've got to have 3 parts to it, right? You need data, you need visuals, and you need meaning. Those are the 3 components of it. And we've got better as societies and as business leaders and organizational leaders, we've got better at that. We realize that just a black and white graph or pie chart is not sufficient. A table is useful, but could be better, right? And might I say, we overuse tables, and you kind of lose audiences sometimes through that. So as a technologist, as a leader, I have seen data be used in every single type of capacity to convince and to communicate. So even if we go fast forward to today, I'm seeing data storytelling almost every single day, whether that's through the many reports that I consume that help inform me to help my students, or through the pitch decks that startups share with me. Now in my life, I'm lucky enough to be here in Silicon Valley. Everybody's got an idea. Doesn't mean it's a good idea, but they have an idea. It doesn't mean it's an idea that's viable, because there's no bad ideas. There's just ideas that can actually result in positive outcomes, and there's those that won't succeed. And so I was thinking about, and I've been thinking about this conversation, and I was thinking, pitch decks are where I see data storytelling quite frequently. Because what you're trying to do with a pitch deck is describe a problem, describe how you solve it, and then convince somebody to probably invest in your idea, right? To part with their cash. And so all those pieces, what's the problem? How do you solve it? Why should you get involved? What's the opportunity? You're competing. And you got to articulate that clearly. You don't have a lot of time often, right? And that's when people will actually give you time, Sometimes they say, send me your pitch deck, email it to me. You take a look at it and you're like, first of all, I don't understand it. So that's the end, right? Or your reaction is, ooh, this was very compelling. I'd like to know more. Let's get on a call. And suddenly now you have a conversation with a founder, with a startup founder. So that's a lot of how I see it. Now, as a business owner myself, well, I'm, of course, presenting to my clients a lot. And there's a lot you can do verbally. There's a lot you can do in person. There's a lot you can do via Zoom. But there's times when you got to bring visuals into the conversation. And sort of, why do I do that? Why would I do that? What have I learned from this? Well, one of the big things that I've learned throughout my career is we're human. That's true, by the way, right? And we can only process. It's crazy. We're actually limited, believe it or not. And so when you present someone with information to support your argument or to communicate something, you got to be very sensitive to the fact that people have a limited capacity for that. And what does that mean? How much can they process in a given amount of time? Is it memorable? Will they remember what you shared with them? Are you telling them the things that they will take away as the important things? One of the issues here, maybe you'll get to issues later. You communicate through a visualization, some sort of graphic that tells a story using data, and you think you're telling one story, but the person receiving it is hearing something and seeing something completely different. So you have to connect that. And finally, you're trying to persuade. That's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to persuade a client to take a certain decision, to make a certain commitment. And I need evidence. I need something to support that. I need not just tables, pie charts, and graphs, but I need a visual that is engaging, compelling, meaningful, talks the language of the audience, and then gets the result I want. So that's sort of my kind of intro comments for you as I think about this topic and the different ways it's showing up in my life and continues to show up.
Side question. Do you think we're always trying to persuade when we are visualizing or telling stories with data?
My inclination to answer that question, just because I've had like 2 seconds to think about it, is no, I don't think that's the only reason. It could be to simply inform, right?
Yep.
Here's what you need to know. I'm not asking you to make a decision. I'm not trying to influence you. I'm simply trying to, for example, bring you up to speed on something. So, good communications, whatever form it takes, is sharing, is basically moving information from you to the recipient, if you like. And success can be measured by, did they hear what you were saying? Did you hear what you wanted them to hear? So it could be informative. It could be an update. It could be the result of a decision, which I guess is like informing. Yeah. So I think as I literally think aloud to your question and talk about it, I'm inclined to say no. There are multiple reasons to communicate through data visualization.
Well, thank you. That was interesting. Just as you were talking, because we were talking a lot about persuasion or like influencing. So thank you for letting me put you on the spot there, because I think there is like inform and persuade, and perhaps there's other ways that we just haven't spent some time to think about. But it's interesting because then and you talked about the audience as well, which is, we can like jump to that question. But as a creator of visualizations, you're thinking about what you want, if it's a message, if it's informing, if it's influencing. But then how do you consider your audience when you are creating that visualization or story?
Very important. Probably should be among the very first things you think about as you start to put together your, let's call it a presentation, your opportunity, right? That's going to completely shape what you do. I mean, a simple example for me is I speak to lots of audiences every week. I speak to students, undergraduate students of traditional age. So we're talking 18, 19 years old. I teach or I'm in front of executive MBA students. So they're mid-career, then leaders, then government people, sometimes children, sometimes very young kids. I get an opportunity to speak at those opportunities too. And you can't use the same PowerPoint, with each of those audiences. So not only do you have to consider the demographic, the language, but also the level, right? What you would share, again, some of this is probably intuitive, but I want to really stress it, right? I present the same, I have let's say a class on digital transformation, right? Pretty hot right now, or even AI, but let's say digital transformation. I teach undergraduates and I teach graduates. The content is going to be obviously similar. Facts are facts, right? Here's what it is and how it's used. But what I show, the examples I use and how I present it is going to be quite different. The one thing I didn't say, which I reminded myself of, was the culture of the audience too. Like you, I'm very lucky to travel and be in front of audiences in every part of the world, frankly. And so that's a consideration too. And you'll really appreciate this more than most people is you got to be really careful with humor. What's funny for Americans might not be so funny for a Singaporean audience. And I have direct experience with this. It just means it's different. It's different, right? And so I think that's important. So let's kind of go back to the fundamentals here is, well, that must manifest in what you have up on the screen, or what you hand out. Will the graphic be more kind of sort of comic format, or will it be more sophisticated because you're talking to maybe a C-suite staff? So these are, I go through this. This is very important when I'm asked to address an audience or it's at some part of a project that I need to present. I'm starting very often, obviously I need to understand the topic, but then I'm equally thinking about very early on the audience, right? Who are they? What do they need to hear? What's the best way to achieve whatever it is I'm trying to achieve? Like you said, am I trying to persuade this audience or am I trying to inform them? Am I trying to entertain them? That's another reason why you might be doing your presentation. So very important. Thinking about all the things I talked about, demographic information, cultural information, context. Would I present the same way on Zoom versus a conference room versus a massive auditorium with 1,000 people? I think not. I think that would change too, right? So every element of the context and environment, I think, needs to be considered as you think about the materials and the way that you present them.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. And like you said, some of it is intuitive, but often we may not think about it until it's presented to us, or in hindsight, you might go, oh yeah, of course I shouldn't have, presented in this way, or the graphic was inappropriate for school children. Like, of course I not, whatever the case is.
Sure.
But I think thinking about that early on and putting the audience at the top is a really interesting way to think about it. And it's interesting because if we say, oh, I don't know who the audience is, then maybe we need to rethink why we're doing, whatever we're doing, the visualization, the storytelling, whatever it is. Yeah. I mean, obviously, really, there's a diverse range of reasons why we would be doing something.
Mm-hmm.
But if we can't at least understand the audience on some level, rethinking, it's hard to make decisions about then what we choose to show.
I'll even go as far as saying, when I'm engaged, let's say I'm being invited to give a keynote talk at an event. And I'm going to ask the obvious questions. Where is it? When is it? What's the theme of the event? They're very, very normal things. But I might go as deep as saying, when am I on the agenda? Am I in the morning? before lunch, in the evening? Am I early in the conference, like early in the week or late in the week? Why does that matter? It matters a lot. If you are the last presentation on the last day, your audience is likely going to be smaller, but it's also going to be more tired. And so you might not want to have a series of 35 graphic slides that are just tables. So you really should, not everybody gets to do keynotes, but everybody gets to present at some point. It doesn't matter what you do in life. You're going to be asked to present. It could be at a birthday party or it could be at a company function or, a business
or even
event.
A meeting. Like even
just
if
a
you've
meeting.
got a,
exactly.
meeting.
So these are very important skills to acquire and be good at. Good communicators do better in their careers than those that are poor at this. I'll tell you a little story here. When I've had a number of leadership positions in my career. And so I had team members who reported to me. And my senior team members, they may be asked to present at a leadership meeting or even at a conference or something. And I would ask them, first of all, sometimes they have to ask for permission. Can they do it? That's very normal. And I would ask, who is it? Why, is this good for you? Is it good for us? What's the rationale? And then I would help them because I bring many, many years, several decades now of experience. And then I'd ask them actually to present to me, to actually do it. And I'd give them feedback. Now, listening to this, you might think, geez, I want to work for Jonathan. He's like a micromanager. There is an element of micromanagement. But let me tell you, the first time this happens, people don't really like it. They say, leave the meeting, they're all smiles. And then they think, goodness, this new boss, he is a micromanager. But then they go and they do the presentation and it goes well. And then they see the value. They come back and say, I've been asked to do another presentation. Can I present to you? And you give some feedback. So, having the opportunity to present and practice with somebody who is invested in you can be the difference between, definitely between a good and a bad presentation, but a big difference between a mediocre and a great presentation.
Yeah, I think that's important because it also gives you a chance to say the things out loud, even if you practice in the mirror, when you're saying them to somebody else. Yeah. Yeah. And it doesn't have to be like word for word script perfect, but it's like, having and getting the feedback that you hadn't even, thought of as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Presenting is such a huge part. And I think it's, as you said earlier, there's so many different contexts. So some of it might be a big keynote, an auditorium, might be a meeting. But I think data visualizations and storytelling are a way of presenting, or they're part of that presentation piece as well. I'm keen to move to, I guess, some of the issues and problems. So not necessarily challenges of data visualizations. We've touched on that a little bit, but I do want to circle back to that.
Sure.
What are some of the issues and problems that, say, you or when you're working for clients, what are they, what data do we have on those issues and problems? What are they, and how are we using data visualizations and storytelling to address or influence decisions about those particular issues and problems?
Well, the first thing I would say is data storytelling is a skill and it has to be learned, right? Isn't it interesting that everybody at some point in work does a PowerPoint, right? And I'm using PowerPoint as just a broad term for presentation software.
We're not sponsored by Microsoft.
No, I'm still a big fan. I've used it for over 30 years. But I realize people are using AI now for their PowerPoints, for their slide decks and all that. So there's lots of new tools. But everybody at some point is asked to do a deck, or they believe they need to do a deck. And many times it's not good. It just looks terrible, right? They don't know how to use it. You got to learn it. You got to learn the tools. So there's the tool set itself, and then there's using data to tell a story. That's a real skill. Like it's a highly intense developed skill that you need to you spend time either going to school or doing a certificate, or if you like YouTube or textbooks, whatever it is that you use to learn something. That's a real. If you don't know, if you haven't learned how to use the presentation tool itself and how to pull in data and then how to present the data, how to tell a story with the data, I mean, that's unfair. Yeah, as a manager, it's unfair to ask your team members to do things that they don't have the skills to do. And what happens is, I saw this so many times in my career, the employee gets a performance ding because of this. But it's not their fault. They just haven't been trained. They haven't had the opportunity to learn a skill to be good at it. So as a supervisor or manager, you have a responsibility that if you ask an existing team member to do something like, hey, could you create a visualization for this project that we're doing or this thing we need? And they go off and they try their best and come back and it's not great. Whose fault is that? You really have to give the person opportunity to learn. Now, the next thing, you get into the data itself, right? Do you have the right data for this story, right? And that means things like, is it current? How old is it? Do you have confidence in it? Is it validated? Here's a big one. This really jumps out, is people will use the wrong data to make the case. And if the audience is really tuned in, they may not say anything, but the presenter will lose credibility. So remember, you're being judged when you're up there telling your story. So again, all skills you need and not easy ones, right? Knowing how to identify the right data, sort it, massage it, get into a place where you can use it to create some sort of nice visual. That is often difficult. So, do you have access to the data set you need to make that case? Are there gaps in the data? And then, ultimately, is it a credible method in which you are presenting? There's a really fun set of slides online. I don't remember exactly how you can find it if you just search. It's basically correlations that are ridiculous, right? Like, it's people who eat a lot of chocolate also have a higher likelihood of being strangled by their bed sheets. And what people do, they take two data sets and they put them on a visual, and it shows that, right? It just shows as your consumption of chocolate goes up, the amount of incidence of death by bed sheets goes up. Well, that's ridiculous. You gotta correlate things that make sense. So that's a really key thing that I see is just using the wrong data to make a different argument. So those are some thoughts right there.
Mm, yeah, that's interesting. And I think who's involved, you might be the one presenting, but you often wouldn't be the person collecting the data, or maybe you are. It depends, what it is. And using credible sources, I think, is something that's really important. And I guess if it's hyperlocal data that's, about your projects, then you might know. But if you're trying to show, a really big, wicked problem, and you've got, specific data that you've got from, I don't know, the UN or governments or whatever, sometimes that can be a lot of the time it can be quite a challenge then to make sure you've got the right data, or whether we need to collect more data. So the project doesn't start at the visual or data or the storytelling part, right? It starts way before, and that can stop people in their tracks, because that can be quite a challenge initially.
Yeah, some people will argue you can make any argument if you know how to manipulate the data and present it in a certain way. Just be careful. Audiences can be really sharp, and you won't be asked back, or you won't get what you want with that presentation.
Yeah, even if if you're making a solid argument, but you've lost your credibility. Oh no, let me come back and I'll show you the real data, or whatever the case is. That loss of trust or credibility is really huge, right? So no matter what you say next is, when we see that with people, right? When they've rightly or wrongly, think of some examples, but I don't want their names mentioned on my podcast.
Don't do that.
No, but even big leaders and things, everything that they do, if we have a certain viewpoint, is good or bad, regardless of what actually is happening. And I think we can relate that back then to how we present and what data we're presenting, even if it has, the best argument. Yeah, that's interesting.
Two quick points on that. One is, once trust is lost, it's very hard to gain it back. Really hard. So keep that in mind as you go through your career. Trust is something that once you've earned it, treasure it, take care of it. But I'm also reminded of, and I see this in my pitch decks, but also on Shark Tank, or whatever the equivalent is over there in Australia, where a person is making a case for their idea, and they say, the market is worth $100 billion, and we just need to get like 1% of it, which should be easy, and we're a big company already. And every single time, one of the sharks will say, "Don't present that argument. That's a ridiculous argument. You don't take the entire market and say you're going to take 1% of it." And I see this sometimes. That's not a good way to do it. I realize there's the total addressable market, and you can kind of, as long as you are credibly taking the audience through how you arrived at the piece that you could win, then I'm okay with it. But to sort of say, we just need 1% of it and we're good, it's not a credible argument. You will lose trust very quickly in a pitch presentation.
Yeah. I think what you just said there around taking us to how you came up with that, or how, whatever visual it is, and that's, I guess, part of the story and the narrative piece, which is really important. Is there an impactful data visualization or story that's left an impression on you? And did it influence your decision-making or your thinking? Mm-hmm. Tell us a little bit about that.
I kind of knew you were going to ask this question, and so I thought about it. And, again, seeing basically data stories a few times a week, there's a lot to pick from. But I thought of two that jump out to me, two visualizations I've seen in my life that are meaningful. And this is going to be a blast from the past for some of your listeners and viewers. It goes back quite a while, but there was a video on YouTube. It was one of the first that ever did this. And the video was called, "Did You Know Shift Happens? We Live in Exponential Times." Hopefully I said that right. Shift happens. It's obviously a play on words. And so you can still find it on YouTube. I looked it up earlier today, and clearly looks dated. And we've come a long way since then. But it was one of the first that had a sort of a really a compelling soundtrack with data, and with sort of the data related to images and stories. If you're just about things that are happening in our world, the technological progress, demographics. And it goes for about 6 or 7 minutes. And it was viral at the time, as much as viral it could be, 20 years ago. And I loved it. It actually has shaped a lot of the ways I still present data today. On the screen, I got the big number, 53%. And then on the right of it, I describe what that number is. Very clear, bold, impactful. It's like, oh, that's a number. That means something, right? And it comes from that genesis of that text. So some of you will know it, and some of you can look it up if you're interested. But keep in mind, 20 years later, it definitely looks dated.
I'll put the link
in fantastic.
The show notes, yeah.
Yeah, love it. I forgot about that. Mm-hmm. And the next one, which I was using up until recently, I just haven't been using it that much. I've sort of, I might often tell the same data stories, but I evolve my presentations. I'm not using the same presentation deck for telling the climate crisis story that I did, 10 years that I use today. I've obviously updated it. But one I used for a very long time, it also was a video file, and it starts with basically a picture of the entire Earth. It's flat, the
Earth is flat.
Imagine that might be the takeaway that people get from this. No, the way that we look at maps of the Earth, it's, you know what I mean? I know there's a name for that. The Mechadar?
Or where you fold out the...
There you go. Yeah, exactly.
That kind of thing. Yep.
Okay. Yeah.
Got it.
And by the way, the sizes of the countries is not right. People know that till today, right?
Yes.
But it is what it is. So it starts, and it has there's a date, it says 1850 or something. And the date starts to go up towards today. And as it goes up, you have the screen is sort of there's an overlay of a color of sort of just kind of light, maybe it's just kind of a grayish. And then, as years go, you get into the 20th century, and then you start to see it getting a little orange, and then it gets towards the end of the 20th century and it's getting red, and you get into the first years of the 21st century and it's getting deep red. And basically what it's communicating to you is the average temperature of the Earth over, 200 years is increasing, clearly. And this is a visualization to show it. It's very impactful as you look at it. You can tell people, you can say, the average temperature has increased by X degrees over the last 200 years. You can put it in a table. You could even put it in as a large number on a screen. But when you visualize this animation over time and you see the years changing, that's the three things, right? That's the data, it's the visualization, and it's the meaning, because the redness, and the degrees that are also on the screen are changing. So that was one that not only was impactful to me and how I think about climate change over long periods and what that might mean for the future, but also a way for me to begin my presentations on future cities or the sustainability movement, because it has that immediate wow factor at the beginning. It's like, if you weren't ready, or you were like, oh no, another depressing presentation about climate change, or or perhaps you're a skeptic and you think, oh God, here's another guy who's going to try to convince me. No matter what you think at that moment, you can't but be profoundly impacted by this visual. And again, it's probably quite easy to find on YouTube, but that has had a big meaning in my life, and for the reasons I described.
So both of those examples have like an animation component, and
they do,
like visual obviously, but and I guess the animation and like moving and pulling on a little bit of emotion for the second one. But the first one, like, what do you think some of those elements are that make it so impactful for you?
Yeah, and these are things that I've seen, that are worth noting, that I'll call out, that I see that are weaknesses in many of the presentations I see, many of the data stories. So the good news is they're both really simple. Simplicity wins, right? Particularly the second one. It's such a simple, I don't remember if it's 45 seconds or a minute, but boy, does it tell you a lot in that 1 minute. And it's really telling you one thing. Something's happening to the average temperature of the Earth over time, right? And all you're looking at is the color of the Earth changing and the years. Right? In the first one, again, I think simplicity really plays a phenomenally outsized role here. Even though the Did You Know video, probably over the 6 minutes or whatever, has a lot of data in it. And honestly, it's actually hard to remember after you watch it. You know that you've been sort of dazzled, but you don't know maybe immediately why. Each one is taken alone. Like, here is one thing we want to share with you. Here is how much data is in the world, or how the demographics of China are changing, or something. And it presents it with each screen is simple, a very relevant graphic. The text is very succinct. There's not a lot of text. I don't think you'll ever see more than maybe 5 words on the screen at any point in time. So that's what they both, the simplicity, the clarity, and the super focus on each of the data things they're trying to communicate are things that shine. Now, let's talk about why a lot of data visualization does not work. People try to include too much. And I got to say, I have examples of this just in the last 7 days. I've had a couple of presentations sent to me from people who said, Jonathan, would you look at this and tell me what you think? Is this worth investing in, or is this an idea worth pursuing? And in both instances, after I reviewed it, my feedback was too much information on every slide. This beautiful graphics, and there's a lot of data, but it's overwhelming. It goes back to one of the very first things I said in our conversation today is human beings have a limited capacity to process what you're telling them or showing them. And if you, in one slide, for example, try to communicate 10 different things, you failed, right? And this is feedback I would give to, the startups I work with and others, is let's be really clear. Let's remove everything that's not important here, and don't try to over communicate. I just graduated a class of information system students, and for the capstone, they all had to make presentations about their thesis that they wrote as teams. And they had 30 minutes to present. And the thesis is, they're like 100, 150 pages. And there's a lot to share. And when you're a team and you're presenting for 30 minutes, you might think, well, that's a lot of time. We can say a lot. No. It's not a lot of time, and you don't want to say everything. You got to be really judicious, really careful what you choose to present. In every instance where they did the practice, they communicated far too much on every slide and in every second. And so I was like, well, we listened, I was a co-professor with this particular capstone. And, we said, here's the feedback is you don't need to tell the audience everything. You want to? We want to, because look at all the great work I did. I'm so excited. I want to show you everything we've done for the last 6 months. Unfortunately, if they want to know that, they can read the report. They can read the thesis, I should say. And so what really matters is what is that you remove it and create this simplicity. We're focusing on some really interesting salient points, the things that a person must know, but you have to recognize that you didn't tell absolutely everything. So, less busy slides, less busy visualization, however it is, whether it's a document, a website, or whatever it is you're presenting, whatever modality you're presenting it in, clarity is your friend here. Not too many colors, too many font changes. There's some designers will tell you about that. Don't have 5 different fonts on one slide and 6 different colors, and consistency throughout. If you show me for the first 3 slides, you kind of got me. You're like, okay, this is interesting. And then on the 4th slide, it's completely different. My brain has to now process this difference. I'm just a human being. I'm a very simple, I'm a monkey with a laser. I keep it simple. So have consistency throughout your story that you're telling.
I think that's important, and I guess because we're talking about the modality of kind of slide decks and things like that. And I think another important thing that you said was when we want, as a creator or the report writer or the PhD student, we're like, oh, we want to tell you everything we've done because we're so excited about it. Look at all this work I did. You've got to put the shoes. Whose shoes? Feet in the shoes of the audience again. May you put their shoes on? Whose shoes? You need to put yourself in the audience's shoes.
There you go.
We made it, because that strips it back. Because otherwise, then it's just about and not the audience. And that's an interesting way to think about these visualizations and data as well, and data storytelling. Because if we don't do that, then we overwhelm, and I think that's a really big mistake that people make. And we can say it, and again, it seems intuitive, but I think often, and even I do it all the time, where I'm like, oh, I'm making this thing, oh, but they should know this, and this, and this, and this. And it's like, actually, no, they can't. And I love what you said about the simplicity as well, because I think some people go, oh, simple graphic, simple data. No, very complex, deep, can be very complex, deep data, thinking about your YouTube, the first video, like the collection, like all of that, lots and lots of data. But to make that simple and digestible is the real skill. And if we talked about skills earlier, that's the skill. Yes. Yeah. So to finish then, any suggestions for your listeners to use data storytelling in their work or life? I mean, we've already talked about some of them, but anything you'd like to leave us on?
I got a few things just to kind of leave as we conclude here. I'm reminded of a saying here. You'll know it when I say it. I was actually surprised that we don't know who made it up. Benjamin Franklin was what I thought about, but apparently it's not confirmed, and some people say it's several other people. But I'm saying we don't know the source, but you'll know it when I say it. It goes like this: tell me and I forget, show me and I remember, involve me and I understand. I mean, mostly we're talking about the second one, show me and I remember, right? That's very important when we talk about data visualization. But I like that old told. I was thinking about it earlier today. I was trying to, I couldn't remember it entirely, the actual saying itself, but I was happy I found it, and it was as useful as I thought, right? So you could walk into a meeting and say, I want to tell you why we should buy this product or hire this person. And, that can go a long way. And if you're particularly articulate, you're very good at that, it'll probably carry you a long way. But if you bring evidence, if you bring that, data to the table, present it in a compelling way, no matter what it is, you're likely to leave more of an impression on the audience, something where you've made an impact, they remember it, and now you're in a position to either ask a question for a decision or say, we will talk more about that the next time we meet, right? They have that information.
Also, that then involved piece comes into it. Maybe it's a question, or if it's because we haven't talked about this in this episode, but interactivity or some even like animation, like you feel involved, right? Perhaps that understanding piece. Yeah, that's what I was thinking about when you were talking there. Yeah, that's
right. We didn't. There's a lot, and perhaps some of your other guests will talk more about that. Where there's one thing to stand up in front of a group of people and say, "I'd like to tell you about something," and another to say, "I want to have a conversation with you. Here are my questions for you." And good salespeople will tell you all about that. It won't even seem like it's contrived. Right? That's how good it can be. So the last two things I wanted to leave you with your audience is two resources that are very well aligned. You probably know both of them. The first one is it's informationisbeautiful.net. One word, informationisbeautiful.net. And it's one of many. I mean, there's many, many sites like this, but I like this one. It's got a lot of really cool examples of how to do data storytelling. And the next one, again, probably not a surprise, I use it all the time, is ourworldindata.com. Our World in Data, which is an absolutely 100% free resource from Oxford University over in Oxford in the UK. And it is rich with good data, which is, being sourced and sorted and made ready for you. Plus, they really do data storytelling. So when you look at things like, it's split into categories. So, there's a category called health, or a category called the world at war, or, there's many. It just doesn't give you a raw data in a text file or in a spreadsheet. It tells an entire story, gives you the background, gives you graphs that you can manipulate, and compares things, and very comprehensive and free.
I love that. I'm just looking. I hadn't actually. I feel like I've interacted with some of these graphs and things in maybe data journalism, like reading articles and things. But just subscribe. So that would be perfect for my PhD, and also speaking, and just bring that data to life, and the stories. I love that. Great resources. Well, we'll put those all in the show notes. And thank you for your time today, Jonathan. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. And I do really, really appreciate you sharing your insight, because I know you're very busy. You have lots on. And I'm looking forward to our next conversation, whenever that happens to be.
Yeah, my pleasure. It's always my pleasure. And it's great to spend time with you.
Thanks again. And we'll talk to you next time. See you, Jonathan.
Bye.
Thanks so much for listening to the Smart Community Podcast. You can find the show notes for this episode and all other episodes at zoeether.com/podcast. That's zoeeather.com/podcast. Have you got a question for me or one of our guests? We'd love to hear from you. Just shoot us an email at hello@mysmart.community. If you enjoyed the show, make sure you follow the podcast wherever you listen, and connect with us on LinkedIn too. And hey, ratings and reviews are always welcome. They help more smart humans just like you find the show. As always, we hope you enjoyed listening to this episode as much as we enjoyed making it.